Sustainability in medical device packaging, and we're going to have Jennifer Bellican from DuPont, Kylie Jupstrom, Tanya Magana, Sarah Rosenblum, and Sophie Strun. And I'll have Jennifer start here, and she can introduce the rest of the speakers. Oh, okay. We're going to wait. There's a slight technical difficulty with the slides. So, is there any icebreaker you would like to do with the group? I had one yesterday. Sure. We've been on COVID for a year and a half, and you've probably all been in many Zoom and team meetings. What's the most interesting thing you saw in somebody's background during a team meeting, during a Zoom meeting? Oh, an elk. Anybody in the audience? Anything interesting? Well, there was a guy yesterday that said during his Zoom meeting, the background and him switched, so his body was then the background of space, and you could see his rest of his room back there.
That'd be weird. Have you seen they were doing like court proceedings thing on Zoom, and the lawyer, the defendant got switched to a cat somehow. Couldn't turn it off, and so they're like right in the middle of like some proceeding, and he's like, "I'm not a cat. I swear I'm not."
I saw one where somebody was working from home, but the company they were at sent everybody a background of one of their conference rooms. So it looked like he was sitting in one of the conference rooms in the company, but he was actually at home. Any other?
We can start talking about our topic a little bit because it's a little bit more abstract on the concept of sustainability.
Sure.
If you want to get off stage.
Sure. Yep.
You don't have to keep on entertaining everybody. Thanks, Mark. Hi. Oh, they're here? Good. Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer Benokin. Are we using this mic or this mic? Either one. Okay. So I'm doing the introduction for this. Before we get going, though, I'm Jennifer Benokin. Kylie Jupstrom, who was supposed to be presenting on the true sustainability portion of our presentation, is not going to be able to make it today. So you're going to have to bear with it with me doing that presentation. And it'll be the first time I'll be basically reading through it. But hopefully I'll be able to bring some flavor to it. I'm definitely not as animated as Kylie, though, so you're kind of missing out. Anyway, Jennifer Benokin. I also have with me Sarah Rosenblum. Raise your hand. Tanya Magana. And Sophie Strun. So all of us are representatives of an industry-sourced, founded group called kipp, Kilmer Innovations in Packaging. And we are going to talk to you guys today, or hopefully have a conversation about sustainability in medical device packaging. So question for y'all, sustainability is true or false? Raise your hand if it's true, keep your hand down if it's false. Sustainability only pertains to being able to recycle. Ooh, you guys are going to be a good audience. You're very smart. All right. Is this the clicker here? All right. So introduction to kipp. I kind of give you a quick introduction of us, and each of them will be presenting or introducing themselves a little bit more when we actually get into the presentations. Tanya and Sarah and I will be each talking about 10 minutes on different topics. And then Sophie is going to be closing us up. So what is kipp? Kilmer Innovations in Packaging. It is an organization or group of, again, industry people who've come together. Started in 2019 in Dublin, Ireland during Johnson & Johnson's Kilmer Conference. What we did was we got together there because there was a low packaging representation within the conference. The Kilmer Conference is invite only, so a very prestigious event in industry. About 300 people attend. And I was on the programming committee for it that time, and I had a hard time convincing packaging people to come. So what we did is we had a meeting ahead of the actual conference while in Dublin. Got about 8 people, I think it was, Sophie, in a room, and we talked about how do we get more people there for the event in 2022. And so the question came up, do we have a problem? Do we need to have more people from packaging represented at Kilmer Conference 2022? And it was a resounding yes, and we do have a problem. And so over the last couple of years, what we've done is, I think we have about 300 people now involved in the group in some way or another through our LinkedIn group. So you can find us there, and we'll have more information on that, I think, a little bit later in the slides. So Peck, you're going to be closing up with that. And we've created a vision and mission, and we have 4 different groups that we are forming through, as well as an education group. Basically, what we're trying to do is create sustainability in medical device packaging, not just in the traditional sense, but allowing us to have continuity within us as a profession, so that we can extend our knowledge to people coming in. And they can join in with us. We're breaking barriers in the value chain of sterility assurance. Oftentimes in medical device companies, we don't have a lot of communication between sterility assurance or microgroups and packaging, and the two really have to function very closely together. We also don't have a good connection with our downstream users, the people who actually open our packages to ultimately allow the device to be used. So we're breaking barriers there too. We've invited clinicians and healthcare professionals into the conversation with us. It's been great, it's been enlightening, and the presentations today are going to cover that. I'm not reading off of the slides because I'm pretty sure you're in this room and you can read, so I'm going to quickly go through these. These are the programs that we have. One is Let's Speed Things Up. That's looking at some of the things that we currently do, test methods. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing them the correct way? Are we testing for the right things? Can we make it quicker in getting through the speed to market? The last 100 yards, what happens when our devices hit the door of a medical facility to the point of time where they go to be opened? Aseptic presentation, which Sarah is going to be talking about. That's now the package is going to be opened. Is the aseptic process that's generally used around the world actually sufficient? Does it actually allow you to aseptically open a package? And then sustainability and end of life, that was the topic that Kylie was going to present, which I'll be presenting. And then at the end, kipp, the education group, and that is something that Tanya is currently leading. So with that, Sarah, you want to come on up? There you go.
Do you just press the forward button? All right. Great. So like Jen said, I'm Sarah Rosenblum. I'm with Packaging Compliance Labs, and I've been running the aseptic opening or aseptic presentation team for kipp. So first, I wanted to start with what is aseptic presentation. Kind of a show of hands in here. Do people understand aseptic presentation? Are we familiar? Yes, sort of. Great. So by definition, aseptic presentation is the process of transferring the sterile barrier contents from its sterile barrier system using conditions and procedures that minimize the risk of microbial contamination. So there's kind of a little icon there that shows you one of the techniques that can be used for aseptic presentation. But the whole concept is you have a package, you have a device, you want to get that device presented in a way that is safe and keeping sterility. So what's the problem? Why is this even a topic that we're addressing within the kipp group? First, we found that there's little scientific evidence currently available to justify the different techniques or to define the different techniques. And there's different methods that are kind of utilized across different regions and different disciplines of the surgical field across different hospitals as well. So we kind of found that it depends where you are and what group you're a part of as to why you do a different technique or you utilize some other technique that maybe another region doesn't use. And then finally, we also found that packaging systems were being engineered without the end user in mind. So we had kind of all these engineers that are designing what they think is the perfect package. And in the end, they have a nurse that's sitting there kind of struggling to open it and can't really interact with the package in the way that it was meant to be. And kind of what's the main reason here? For proper aseptic presentation, it's really the only way we can fight against hospital-acquired infections. as far as packaging goes. So that is kind of the driver behind why we're here. So what are some of the big questions that we're addressing as a KIPP group? The first is, how do we understand and better define what constitutes proper aseptic presentation? So like I said, with the different regions using different techniques, we're really looking at why do certain regions use different techniques and why do certain medical sectors use those techniques as well. How do we as packaging engineers kind of design packages with the end user in mind? So how do we become more in tune with the people that are using the packages that we are designing? And then lastly, can packaging play a role in the prevention of hospital-acquired infections? Can we save more people and treat them better by engineering packages that make it safer for them to be in a hospital environment? So I wanted to paint the picture of really what does this mean and what is the impact on everyone such as you or anyone else that you know that's been in a hospital. So the first is 234 million. That's the average amount of surgeries that are performed in the world in a year. So there's millions and millions and millions of surgeries going on every year. And out of those, 1.7 million within the US end in a hospital-related infection. So 1.7 million people every year are getting an infection because of the surgical environment and what is happening to them while they're in that environment. And then out of that, 99,000 people die of hospital-related infections every year. So that's someone that could have had the opportunity to have their surgery and move on in life, and instead a hospital-related infection led to their death. This next stat is actually from the SPMC. If you're familiar, they're the Sterile Packaging Manufacturing Committee. So thank you to them for supplying this statistic. But in your lifetime, you'll interact with 450 sterile packages, which is a lot of opportunity to open and aseptically present packages. Then lastly, what's kind of the economic impact? There's $45 billion that are kind of the burden on the US economic system for HAIs, which is a pretty big number to consider as a burden on the US economy. So what are we doing about it as a KIPP committee? The first piece is we are creating a guidance to Section 7 within ISO 11607. As a show of hands, how familiar are we with ISO 11607? Does everybody know what that is? Awesome. So ISO 11607 is the guidance document to sterile barrier packaging. Recently there was a revision and it included Section 7. Section 7 is kind of forcing us as engineers to consider the end user and to talk about aseptic presentation. It is written in a way that is up for a little bit of interpretation. So us as a group within KIPP is working to create a guidance document that provides more clarity and more verbiage behind how we define aseptic presentation and how we know if it's done correctly and well. The end goal is to do a technical white paper to publish this guidance document. And then the long-term goal is to pursue publication through AMI. And the hope would be that would end up with it being an actual part of ISO as a standard. The next piece that we're doing is a healthcare survey. So like I said originally, there's not a lot of data currently on why people aseptically present in a certain way and what technique is better. So we really wanted to get a survey out there that's targeting those healthcare professionals and looking to define why people present in certain ways. Why is it regionally based? Why is it motivated by what surgical operating room you're in? So we're looking at getting feedback, and that feedback will then also play into some of the guidance. So we wanted to really get the voice of the end user into our guidance as engineers. And lastly, there is an ASTM committee that is also creating a guidance document. So our group is playing into that committee as well. So these are all things you can get involved with, which is great. So if you're interested in learning more about the topic, we'd not only love to have you as a part of our group, but the ASTM committee is also another great option too. Yeah, if this sounds exciting, I'd love to have you join. You can reach out to me directly today, or I have my email, phone number, or LinkedIn as well. We'd love to have you join the committee. It's really exciting, and we've been doing some cool things. So hand it over to Jen now, right? Kylie. Fake Kylie.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm telling you guys are missing out on Kylie because she's really a fantastic gal. So anyway, first slide here. This is an introduction to all the people that are pretty heavily involved with the sustainability group. As you can see, they're from a myriad of different companies, which really encompasses and embraces what KIPP is all about. One of the biggest questions that comes up when people first start hearing about KIPP and getting curious about it is, what if we develop something that is intellectual property? And the whole premise behind Kilmer Conference is to collaborate, to innovate. And I think Sopek is going to talk a little bit more about that in the conclusion. But if you're an individual working at an individual company on a particular topic, it might take you 10 years to get to the solution to that problem, right? Now, what if you're involved with all of these great brains up on the screen at the same time and you get there in 2 years and everybody wins? How cool would that be? That's what the whole intent behind Kilmer Conference is, and why we set up KIPP to work specifically and focus on packaging specific. So these are the people. They're from all different organizations. They're from large companies. They're from small companies. I think this one isn't necessarily indicative as much as the other ones, but we always have some people from the healthcare industry side as well, and that's what is helping us do some of the surveys that Sarah was mentioning. We've got a couple that we've conducted already, and I'm sure we're going to have more into the future, because it's not something that KIPP isn't a finite event. It's not just to get us to the next Kilmer Conference. Again, we want sustainability in medical device packaging. And so we'll change as the times change, but right now, sustainability is one of those hot topics. So we talked about before we started the concept that sustainability isn't just recycling. This team is looking at those discussions right now. What all entails sustainability? Where can we bring it in? What are we not currently looking at in the value chain? For healthcare organizations, it can seem like something that's kind of pie in the sky, something that everybody wants to do but can't find a way to do. And there are a few organizations out there already trying to tackle this problem, and KIPP is working with those organizations in a different way to, again, bring that to light and have the discussion happening. If you go to any packaging school right now, across the United States, one of the hottest topics is sustainability and how can packaging be sustainable. And it seems like it's kind of like an oxymoron, right? Where you're driving after two different goals, because you would think that packaging people would want to employ more packaging because that's what they do and that's what they love. But no, we really want to create a sustainable environment for everyone, right? And we understand that our packaging is part of that picture. All right, so this is kind of a funky picture, but these are all the places along the value chain that we're looking at. How can we incorporate sustainability? Starting at the top with the material selection. Are we picking the right materials? Are they sustainable in and of themselves? Can they be recycled at the end if they need to be? How can they be recycled? Next step, package design. Are we designing our packages with sustainability in mind? How can we help packaging engineers at medical device companies learn how to design in a sustainable manner? Business models, again, you go into the companies and does this package that we're developing not only keep sustainability in mind from a package design standpoint, but from a business model for our products that we want to present out into industry? Manufacturing method. Maybe there's some things in our processes that we can cut out that won't need as much energy, electricity, so we can be more sustainable there as well. Or even water, right? In some cases, materials are made and they require a lot of water to be used to manufacture them. Maybe we can cut some of that out. Shipping method, again, in some cases, if you can get it smaller, which in some cases you can't, does it allow you to maximize your shipping, saving you money while also being sustainable? Intended use, same thing here. Can we help that end user have a sustainable package for end of life and getting rid of it. Downstream after that, now they've used the device, the package is just sitting there, it served its purpose, we need to get rid of it. There's a big problem in healthcare facilities where a lot of them have been around for hundreds of years, and their facilities are really tiny and small, and they can't hold waste to be then collected by waste stream collectors. It's easier and cheaper for them to put it into the waste bin, trash bin, and have it go to a landfill somewhere. Are there ways that we can start being a little bit more smart about that? Is there a way that we can turn it into an economic equation, if you will, and make it more profitable for someone? Because, like, let's be real, that's how things are going to happen, is if someone can make money on it, right? So how can we encourage that to happen? And then going to sorting and recycling technologies. There's advanced recycling now that's available that allows you to break down the materials to their base structure, like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So your waste stream doesn't necessarily have to be sorted anymore because it's going down to the elemental basis to then rebuild into something else. So you don't have to keep all of your HDPE with HDPE anymore. You can put it all into the same waste stream. It's broken down and then used again. All right. I get so excited about things, so I get out of breath. Okay, sustainability and end of life. This is, I think, the last, no, not one of the last slides. So we're focusing on upstream innovation, which includes everything upstream of collection for the most part right now. There's a lot of work being done downstream led by industry groups such as Healthcare Plastics Recycling Council, or HPRC. And they're, like I said, working with them. How can they collaborate to advance our shared agendas? Again, I can't stress enough, sustainability is so much more than recycling. How can we rethink packaging design and processes, including manufacturing methods and logistics? We're asking what barriers inhibit our ability to make progress and change the way our industry has always been thinking. So where we've come from is defining the problem. What is sustainability? I asked you guys at the beginning of the presentation, does sustainability mean just recycling? And you guys were very smart and said, no, it's not. But this group has spent a lot of time talking about that question. What is sustainability? And so they've been building into that. They've developed a problem defining exercise, and they've been taking out actions for that, and they have some outcomes from that as well. So where they've come from, stakeholder discovery interview series, where they're really getting an understanding of how things are being looked at from a sustainability perspective, and where the opportunity is where KIPP Group can provide assistance. And they're engaging, they're going out and they're talking to the different aspects of the value chain. I don't know that I've ever heard of an industry group going to talk to GPOs themselves, because GPOs are right now making decisions on who they put in a contract from MDM device perspective as to whether the device is sustainable or not. And it goes back up into the MDM's core values and what they're after right now. So we're hoping to get that message out as well. So here's where we are. We're continuing to discover and engage with our stakeholders. We're looking at being an upstream innovator incubator, which is where groups like HPRC might come to KIPP and say, hey, we don't have enough resources within our group to actually execute this study. Would your group be interested in helping us figure out whether this is a viable option or not? And this is something that KIPP is really excited to participate in. And then there's the medical device packaging sustainability roadmap as a toolkit for MDMs to be able to use in their designing of the packages that they have for their product. Sustainability industry collaboration, I mentioned this, HPRC, PGH, SPC. There are a lot of industry organizations out there. KIPP is really aimed at, again, collaborating to innovate. So how can we work with these groups, not as adversaries, not as competitors, but how can we work together to all get to where we want to go faster? And then industry awareness, call to action. And that's part of what we're doing here in speaking. Sharing with you, maybe one of you in the audience is really gung-ho about sustainability, you want to talk about it with us, please contact us. So the two leaders we have for this group are Jen Goff from Oliver Healthcare Packaging and Kylie Gypstrom from Plastic Ingenuity. Their contact information is up there for email perspective, but they can both be found quite readily on LinkedIn, as with all of us. So with that, I'm going to ask Tanya up here.
All right, hello, good afternoon. My name's Tanya Magana. I'm currently a packaging principal engineer at Ecolab. So I'm going to talk about kipp. Oh. All right, so what is kipp? We are an education committee that consists of industry professionals that are really passionate about improvement in the sterile packaging arena. So this would be specific for single-use devices or multi-use that would need to be reprocessed. Looking to have an opportunity for collaboration, raise awareness on some real issues or pain points within industry, and deliver cross-functional education to close some of these known gaps. And one of the questions, I guess, that I had in creating education committee is, how do we share the tribal knowledge that we've learned in industry, not only just for folks that might be new and coming into medical device, but for the younger packaging engineers and our students. Wanted to share the folks that are supporting the educational committee. Currently, we have 7 individuals who have great backgrounds, different cross-functional inputs that are great for the team. And then some of our educational goals for the committee is how do we break out of this silo working approach that we currently have? One of the slogans, I guess I like to say, is we don't know what we don't know. There's a lot of misconception or lack of communication across all of the different touch points in industry. A great example of this is nurses might think that the packaging is tested at the primary barrier level, where in fact, packaging engineers, we tested at a shelf carton or the primary master case level. The problem with this is, say a nurse drops that package on the ground, is that able to be reused? The nurses might interpret that different than a packaging engineer. So if we're starting to have cross-functional communication, we might be able to start closing some of these gaps that we see and really making sure that our packages are safe and effective for the end users. And then we're definitely looking to provide content to our audience. You know, how do we share all the information that we're learning and the gaps that we are starting to understand? Just increase awareness and opportunities to close some of these gaps. And this won't be specific just for packaging industry, but packaging students, nursing. You know, how do we make sure that we're collaborating against all the different touch points and functions that a package is going to see? So our engagement strategy, how are we going to share the content within industry? There's a couple different touch points, presentations such as this, and just gaining awareness of what we are as a committee, sharing research findings, different surveys, not specific just to packaging, but for the nurses or the healthcare professionals as well. Publications, standards and regulations, and supporting any updates there. Podcast is a big one. Process This, supported by Isham, is a great podcast. I would highly suggest folks that are newer to industry or still in industry that want to learn more to reach out and listen in on some of the topics that are ongoing right now. And then student curriculum, again, not specific just for packaging engineers, but cross-functionally. How do we get everybody on the same page speaking the same language? So what's to come for 2021 and beyond for the Education Committee? We're currently working on a white paper. This is specific to design and development, verification and validation activities around ISO 11607, 1 and 2, specifically focused for healthcare professionals. So what we're coming to find is that we don't speak the same language. Packaging or the nurses might not necessarily be aware of some of the activities that are ongoing as far as the packaging design and validation. So this is just going to help create an understanding and a baseline and hopefully an appreciation for the process that we go through as packaging engineers to develop. And it hopefully will help answer some of the why questions. If you've ever attended or been on a nurses panel, excuse me, you'll sometimes hear them ask a lot of questions of Why do you have multiple barriers? Why are the peel tabs so small? I can't open the package. Why are there multiple inserts within your trays? Hopefully, providing a background of some of the design and development activities will help answer some of those questions. And then podcasts, I touched a little bit about this on Process This. Really working to work cross functions against all of the different KIPP groups. And this is just going to help collaborate on the findings and gain knowledge and spread those words to industry. And then another really exciting item we're working towards is the end-to-end video. And this is really going to create awareness on all different touch points within the sterile packaging. I think a lot of misconception comes from lack of awareness or not having any input or vision, I guess, for what's happening in the healthcare facility. I can speak to that personally. So being on the committee and listening to these different calls, I've learned a lot with that. But the hope is here is to create a video so other folks would be able to understand those different touch points. So again, like everybody else, we're definitely interested in more folks joining, looking to gain more connections across industry. And this is really just a great way to learn about hot topics that are happening and how the Education Committee is going to close these gaps. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to myself or Austin, Lou. Contacts are there. Otherwise, LinkedIn is a great way to contact us as well. And up next will be SoapSpeak.
All right, thank you. All right, how do I do this? There we go. So I'm just going to wrap things up. So I'm Sopex Run from QTS. We're located just south of Minneapolis in Bloomington. And so within KIPP, what we've shown today, this is just the surface. There's so much other stuff that is going on right now. We could be up here all day long talking about everything else that we're doing. And, this goes back to the spirit of the Kimmer Conference. That's directly in our mission statement. We're all about collaboration, connection, and education. We're more than just packaging professionals. So, with everything that we're doing, we have a ton of healthcare workers that are involved in our activities. Personally, I'm in sterility assurance, not a packaging engineer. And, the reason why I got involved, I was at the Kilburn conference. My company works in packaging. And, there's a need for people to collaborate with each other, especially between packaging engineers and sterility assurance professionals. And, it's also more than just that. There's, I mentioned healthcare workers, collaborating between packaging engineers and nurses. There's so much more to it. So, what we're doing here, this really is just the beginning. We started a few years ago. We've grown to, about 300 members. And these projects are, they're already sparking new ideas and fostering collaboration between different companies, within the same companies sometimes, outside of the packaging community. This really is the sustainability part of it, what we're trying to do, just to get people to talk to each other. So, we definitely invite everyone to get involved. I'd say start with our LinkedIn group. You should be able to find us through searching for Kilmer Innovations in Packaging. You could also look for each of us on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find us. And also, feel free to come talk to us, either by contacting us directly or coming up to us afterwards to have a chat. So with that, I'm going to ask, does anyone have any questions? Move into that.
I'll ask a question on packaging. So at my company, Innovize, we do packaging for a lot of our customers. They tell us what they want, basically, and then we just implement it, and they're sort of the driver, and then ISO 11607, driving some of the requirements. But yeah, there's typically, our requirement is we have to maintain it sealed, and that's the only requirement. And so it's up to them to decide how much the seal should be. But is there any kind of guidance on, like from a user point of view, is this is too much of a seal, the seal strength? Is there something that's saying, don't go over 5 pounds because the nurse will never be able to open that or something?
Sure. Yeah.
So just kind of regarding is there anything that actually defines what your seal strength should be? Typically speaking, at least on the PCL side, we recommend our clients to develop their acceptance criteria within their OQ and PQ. So really when they're finding out how their material is performing, to talk about the usability side of it, that is probably the most common thing you see at Health Pack, is there's always a 4-foot long tray and a 4-foot tall nurse, and she can never get it open. So I think that's one of the things we're trying to address as an aseptic presentation group, is trying to look at, can you over-engineer a package to where a nurse can't interact with it in the appropriate way? So that is exactly what we're looking to address. There is not something that just says, here, do this. We're hoping to better define how to help answer that question. I don't think there's a universal definition answer to basically say this is the seal strength you need. But good question.
To add on to it, from an ASTM perspective, a standard is being developed, guidance is being developed on how to determine what that minimum peel strength needs to be. And it does take into account not only, like Sarah mentioned, what's coming out of your IQ, OQ, PQ, and really OQ, PQ, but also it is supposed to take into account what are your users expecting. Because if it is too easy to open, then they question, was it really sealed properly? And we all have that on a regular basis. I think of yogurt containers on, almost every time I open that, I'm like, it feels a little bit too light. Was that tampered with? Was it sealed properly, right? And then there's also the flip side. We were talking about this at dinner last night, when you can't get into the package, and when you finally get into it, the contents of what you're trying to get to are all over the floor and unusable. And there's the perfect tension in there that, packaging engineers are trying to get every single time. So the discussion is ongoing, but I think it is something that is going to come up. And I think it will, as the healthcare workers get more in tune with the packaging community, and ask these different questions. And we're on the tip of the iceberg in conversations with them. We use a lot of the same vernacular, and we're finding that we're applying them very differently. And so we have some really rich conversations in our group meetings where those questions are coming up. That isn't one that hasn't necessarily come up in a big way yet, but give it time. It's going to blossom.
Thank you. More questions, anyone?
I don't think it's quite a question, but maybe a comment. So I used to work in a laboratory space, and we tried recycling and ran into so many barriers with recycling because of biohazard waste. And so we would have recycling companies that wanted to do a single source stream, but then they didn't want to sort any of our material. So we finally ditched recycling and just threw everything to landfill. And so when I think about our product that the company I work with is developing, it's going into a clinical laboratory where there's going to be a lot of biohazard materials. And the idea of recycling goes out pretty quickly, potentially, depending how the clinical laboratories work, but then that puts it towards biodegradable products or reducing packaging. I feel like we bump into barriers there as well with shelf life and then some of the requirements on the packaging. So I feel like it's definitely a space to innovate, but then it's going to be so many boundaries to kind of navigate, and then potentially a space for new materials. So I don't know if it's really a question, but just like when the initial question about recycling and sustainability, I was like, yeah, it's not really much of an option, at least in the space I'm familiar with.
So yeah, definitely that's a concern. I mean, if it's red bag waste, that's a different conversation. But the majority of the waste that's coming out of any procedure, the majority of those devices that are used are open well before the patient even gets rolled into the room. And that packaging is clean. And that's where we're focusing most because it's going to be able to give us the biggest bang for our buck, right? I believe in some institutions, they red bag everything regardless. But I think a lot of healthcare facilities are getting more critical of how they dispose their waste because sustainability is a big thing for them as well. So I think in the next few years, a lot is going to change. So the right conversations are being had, but I don't know that we're going to get to the red bag waste right off the bat. It sounds like what you're talking about is the red bag waste that truly has been soiled by having been in contact with human tissue or fluids. Mm-hmm. You know, honestly, one of the interesting things, I haven't spent a lot of time with the sustainability team so far, but one of the interesting things that I've been kind of picking up from them is the concept of sustainability means something different geographically too. Like if you're in the middle of Iowa where you have a lot of land and there's tons of landfill left, it's really cheap to just throw it into the landfill. It costs more to recycle. But when you're out east on the coast in highly densely populated areas where the landfills are full, the conversation is a lot more, high on people's priority list. So I think we're going to see different solutions for different geographies, at least initially. And those geographies where it's already a pain point are going to be the places where it's probably going to be implemented first and ironed out. And then it'll hopefully move back into like the Iowas where a lot of land is available, but we don't necessarily want to use it for that. So you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
One of the things that we hear in Iowa, when sustainability talks about is corn plastic. We have lots of corn, so that becomes how to make plastic out of corn and we do that. Landfills and corn plastic.
Yeah, and that's actually a big part of that slide that we had, the whole upstream versus downstream part of it. It's also the sustainability in manufacturing processes as well.
Okay, it's 11:45. One more question if we have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could just shout, if you can make fuel out of corn, there's no reason you can't make plastic out of corn. Somebody would just have to get behind that and develop it.
So I do work at DuPont, and we are looking at, are there different materials that can be used? From my understanding, at this point in time, we may not have the manufacturing processes needed to be able to create the materials in such a way that they are usable for medical device packaging. You have to have certain properties, it's filaments in Tyvek, right? It's long continuous strands. Not all source materials can do that as an output from a manufacturing process that are currently available. So I know companies are looking at it, but I don't know where it's going to go. My guess is that food is already showing adoption of alternate materials that aren't based in petroleum. And for all I know, DuPont does too. I don't know the technical side of it, but I know that the big chemical companies are definitely looking at it because that's probably where it's going to happen first.
Hey, thank you all. Let's give this group a big round of applause.